let's go into the glossary of revenue malpractice. What is the clinic leaky bucket?
So in healthcare, you've got medical malpractice, which every practitioner seeing patients is going to be very focused on, mainly because if you get sued by a patient, you have a problem. And so medical malpractice is the get out of jail free card when something goes wrong. And unfortunately, it does go wrong. And it's a fundamental of being a private practitioner. You need med mal, no questions asked. There's a whole other side to that, which is what we would call revenue malpractice. Revenue malpractice is what happens when revenue doesn't go well, in a similar way that medical malpractice is what happens when clinical doesn't go well. And so inside of revenue malpractice, in a similar way that inside of medical malpractice, you've got lots of different reasons that things can go wrong in providing patient care. You've got lots of different things that can go wrong in revenue management as well. One of those things is a leaky bucket. And so when we say leaky bucket, what we mean is there's an incredible amount of focus on filling the top of that bucket with new leads. So I'm going to spend on marketing, I'm going to spend on my website, I'm going to spend on ads, I'm going to spend on SEO, I'm going to drive inbound to that top of funnel, and I'm going to focus all of my energy on how many new inquiries do I get or how many new leads do I get. And then as you start to move those leads down the funnel, you start to realize you've got 10% drop off here, 20% drop off here, 10% drop off here, 15% drop off here. And if you take a cohort of 100 patients and you pull them through a clinical system, oftentimes only 50 come out the other side. And that's a huge problem because you're losing 50% of your addressable customer base simply because your journey is not stitched together. And clinics lose, but also patients lose because life is busy. And if you're beginning a clinical pathway, your intention is oftentimes to complete that clinical pathway. This is not like shopping for online shoes where you come back to your basket later. If you begin a program of rehabilitation or you begin a program of care, you're doing that because you want to achieve a certain clinical outcome. If you're not able to achieve that clinical outcome because the practice is not supporting you throughout the journey and things just start slipping, then it's lose for the practice, lose for the patient. And so the leaky bucket is really about closing off those points of revenue loss. And they happen all across the patient journey. So they happen, as an example, lead converting to consultation is a big point of drop off. No lead management, no sales function, no sales desk. Another huge point of drop off is consultation, which doesn't actually progress to a treatment. Some people won't progress to a treatment because there's a contraindication. There's a medical reason not to progress. That's fine. Of course, that patient shouldn't progress. Others might choose not to progress because they didn't like the practitioner. That's really helpful feedback. Others may choose not to progress because of price. That's also really helpful feedback because maybe you can offer flexible payment options or treatment finance to allow patients to bridge that care gap. But many of them won't progress simply because they are not managed. And so you've got another big point of drop off around what we will call consultation no progression. The same thing happens as you move throughout the journey. So you've got this black hole of clinical follow-up. Patients will go through a journey and suddenly start disengaging because holiday intersected with when they had their next appointment and nobody decided to follow up with them when they got back. And similarly, you've got this big black book of patients who are sitting in your database in your practice management software, EMR, EHR. And I was speaking to a clinic owner yesterday who works as part of a group, and there's a group CEO. And he was telling a very funny story that every month or so, the group CEO comes in and demands that a mass email is sent out to all of their patients. Send out the mass email, he'll say. Send it out to everyone. And that is the CEO recognizing that there is a problem in the recall function and having no system for approaching that issue aside from just blast everyone. And blasting everyone, A, doesn't work. B, is on the wrong channel because email is dead. And C, ultimately degrades attention in the patient body because every time you communicate with the patient, you're eating into their attention. And if you keep sending them things that are not relevant and you keep following up with them in a way that feels spammy or not fit for purpose within their clinical pathway, you are degrading the relationship. And so the way in which you follow up, the day, the time, the moment really matters. And that is all about constructing supports for that leaky bucket.
That kind of leads into the next term, which is front of house empty desk. So front of house empty desk is when phones go unanswered, leads drop because no one's focused on revenue. Can you speak about that a little bit and how the front desk isn't there to answer the phones when leads come in because of the leaky bucket?
Yeah, so lead management in healthcare is a bit of a weird one. So if you look at a traditional B2B business, overwhelmingly lead inbound is email driven. You reach out to a supplier, it comes by email. Maybe in certain sectors, you might reach out to them by WhatsApp or by phone, but those channels are typically email driven. In healthcare, you've got lead inbound across 5, 6, 7 different channels. You've got phone lines, email, WhatsApp, SMS, social media. In some cases, you've also got walk-ins if it's community-based care. And so you've got this massive fragmentation in the lead point of origination. So one of the big challenges is, am I even surfacing the lead at the point of origination? And there's a lot of tools in the market right now that allow you to do that. Anytime someone reaches out to you, create a record in my CRM. The problem is not origination. Origination is a problem that existed 10 years ago. People have solved that problem. There are great software providers in the market that have solved the problem of originating and identifying the lead. The problem is what happens next. And the reality is that the empty front desk isn't just about the phone not being answered. It's about the revenue mindset. And this is the biggest problem with AI receptionists. And I think we're missing a huge opportunity in healthcare to actually improve things rather than just accelerate something that doesn't work. Because if you put an AI receptionist in the place of answering a call, great, everyone always has their call answered. But unless that AI receptionist can rigorously qualify the lead, you're missing an opportunity. Qualification of the lead means, why are they reaching out? Are they in my core customer segment? What channel did they come from? What marketing campaign did they come from? And how do I then take that information and push it back up to my marketing spend to improve the kinds of patients that I'm engaging with rather than just ending up with all of this noisy inbound? And so there are 2 jobs to do when addressing this empty front desk problem. The first one is, I need to make sure I'm originating and tracking. That's actually an easier problem to solve today. The second problem is I need to make that a strategic function in the clinic. I need that function to be about growing revenue, improving return on ad spend, and better qualifying my patient inbound, as opposed to just, can I answer the phone? Can I answer the phone is a 2005 problem. Now we're in 2025. So things need to move on. We need to improve the qualification, and we need to improve the revenue function at that front desk.
So this kind of brings us into the admin fog, where the front desk team seems to be juggling calls, forms, walk-ins, and then also revenue alongside all of their day-to-day tasks, with zero time for proactive conversion. Can you speak into that a little bit and why you think that's the case?
Yeah, the idea of fog, it is the perfect description for what happens at front office. Everything at front office is reactive. The entire design of front office is reactive. Someone calls in, I react to it. Someone walks in, I react to it. An Amazon delivery arrives, I react to it. There's something missing on stock, I react to it, and I go out and purchase something. A practitioner writes to me to follow up with a patient, I react to it. Being reactive is a critical component of front office operations, and it shouldn't go anywhere. But reactive is not a revenue function. Proactive is a revenue function, and proactive does not exist, full stop. You cannot expect a team that is constantly dealing with inbound, that is constantly dealing with juggling, to also be thinking about pipeline management, patient follow-up, especially when they don't have the right tools or systems to do that. So we have this description of fog that sort of sets in and makes it very hard to actually get anything done in front of house. You can do a lot in front of house, but it's hard to get anything done, which is a very strange tension between I'm constantly busy, but a lot of that busyness is actually not moving the business forward. And so you end up over-investing in your front office. And we've got clinics right now that we work with that will go out and hire an additional front office team member just to do consultation follow-up. That will be their entire job, just to do consultation follow-up. 30,000 pounds a year, excluding employment costs, management time, vacation days, sick days, etc., just to do consultation follow-up. Because they realize how important that job is, and they have no other way of solving the problem aside from, I will just pay someone full-time to do that. They will sit in the room, listen to the consultation, just to do that, because my reception team cannot reliably do that. The only way that they can reliably do that is by managing Excel spreadsheets, or writing sticky notes, or having a black book that describes what needs to happen in follow-up. That is not a system for proactive revenue management. That is a, what fire do I need to put out today? which is a completely different posture, outlook, perspective to what it means to have a revenue-centric front office.
So there's actually 2 points that, that branches into. One is the revenue orphan, the fact that no one actually owns revenue in a clinic, and everyone thinks it's everyone's job to do. So if you want to go into that. And then the second point will be the follow-up fallacy, which is that clinics believe they already do recall by just sending out an automated email through MailChimp or a mass email, and that's their version of recall, even though we all know that doesn't do much. So do you want to go into the revenue orphan and how no one really owns engagement or conversion in clinics?
Yeah, there's that great saying that if everyone owns something, no one owns it. And so if you look in an organization, forget healthcare for a minute, you just look in an organization, you say, everybody owns sales. Everyone's responsible for sales. What that actually translates to is nobody is responsible for sales, which is exactly why you have a chief customer officer or chief commercial officer or a VP sales. You have someone whose job is to own the number. The number in this case is revenue. Somebody in the business owns revenue. And what's absolutely fascinating in healthcare is that person does not exist. There is no, especially in small and medium-sized based care, there is no one who owns revenue. So you've got a registered manager for CQC, you've got a nominated individual, you've got a principal practitioner who overlooks clinical care. You've got all of these responsibilities in the clinic. You've even got someone who's specifically responsible for maintaining cleaning products to CQC compliance standards. Please point to the person who owns revenue. What is their name? If that person doesn't exist, nobody owns revenue. And because nobody owns revenue, it is a problem. You are losing revenue all over the place because nobody owns revenue. And when I say owning revenue, what I mean is you are waking up in the morning thinking about revenue. When you're on your lunch break, you're thinking about revenue. When you go to sleep at night, you're thinking about revenue. You are always thinking about revenue. This patient, that patient, the other patient, which patient did I not follow up with? Why am I losing this cohort of patients? What's going on with this practitioner and why aren't they converting post-consultation? That owner does not exist unless it is the clinic owner, but the clinic owner is not able to operate at the necessary level of depth to have hands-on responsibility for revenue. They obviously see it at a business owner level, but they can't get deep enough in the problem to actually start changing things. And if they try to do that, then they get stuck and they get mired in the day-to-day, and they're not able to actually work on the business. They're basically working inside the business only. And so revenue orphan means show me the person. Who in the clinic, when they walk in the morning, sits down, opens up their funnels, opens up their dashboard, looks at their metrics, and says, today we are tracking to X, tomorrow we are tracking to Y. That person doesn't exist. And so we have a problem in these clinics. We have a problem of revenue absent-mindedness, and yet it's exactly the thing that moves the needle.
Can you define what the follow-up fallacy is? The fact that clinics believe that they're already doing recall by sending out mass emails to their patients?
Yeah, I spoke to a clinic owner yesterday. He runs 4 physiotherapy clinics. Does about $1.5 million in turnover. Nice size small group. We were talking about recall, and he said, I'm not really sure what our recall protocols look like, but I know we have a lot in place. I'll connect in my practice manager, my business manager, and let her feed in. And so she was able to comment. And what came to be in that conversation was that recall is the physiotherapist who makes 1 phone call and 1 email to patients who don't have a next appointment. That's it. That's the recall process. I will call my patient once, and if they don't answer, I will send them an email. That's it. I followed up.
And why is that not enough?
2 touch points will never be enough, especially when they don't answer the phone call and nobody reads their email. So you, in your mind as a practice, say, I followed up. But you following up and the patient actually understanding that you followed up, understanding that something is going on, that they need to do something, are worlds apart. It's the same thing. You look at a classroom teacher. I taught it. Doesn't mean they learned it. There's a huge world of difference in between there. And to hear with such conviction from practice owners, we do this. We're really good at recall. We don't have this problem. Cool. Tell me what your recall looks like. We send 2 emails. Okay. You're competing against Netflix. You're competing against Amazon. You're competing against companies that are driving the attention economy into your customer. You cannot possibly win with 2 emails and a phone call that they don't answer, because inside of that email inbox, they've got their new favorite TV series, they've got their upcoming delivery, they've got their food, they've got their kids' school's correspondence. Why on earth would they go to your poorly optimized email that looks like it was designed 15 years ago to make an online booking, which, by the way, has 14 steps and they can't do it on their phone? No way. That is not recall. Recall is in the channel that the patient wants to communicate with you on. If they're WhatsApp native, they should be communicating with you on WhatsApp. If they're SMS native, let them communicate with you on SMS. If they're phone native, let them communicate with you on phone. We speak with patients all the time. And some cases, we will call that patient. They'll answer and they'll say, oh yeah, I was meaning to come back in. Actually, can you text me? Cool. We then know text is the golden zone. That's where the patient is most natively communicating. So omni-channel is a must. Again, 2025, not 2005. But also understanding and mapping that communication to where the patient is very important, because when you send one email out at 11 a.m. on a Monday and you think you've done follow-up, you're kidding yourself. I was like, that's not follow-up. So we often see that follow-up requires 6 touch points, 7 touch points, 8 touch points, moving across channels, understanding when the patient is more or less likely to respond. And we have the benefit of seeing this over tens of thousands of patient engagements. And so we know, heads up, 11:03 a.m. when it's rainy on Monday afternoon on a bank holiday, golden zone. That's the time to re-engage, not around your front office's team lunch break. Turns out that your patients don't want to answer the phone at 12 p.m. on a Tuesday just because your team wants to make a phone call at that time. So if you're really patient-centric and you're a healthcare practice and you're thinking, I do everything to serve my patients, that includes communication. That includes when you reach out to them, not just the quality of care in the room, but the quality of engagement afterwards and the accessibility of that engagement. We have patients write back into us via SMS and WhatsApp, a whole long thing. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to hear from you. Oh, please send my regards to Mark and Jane. They were wonderful. The treatment was spectacular. The practice never hears that. The clinic never knows what the patient thinks. They never understand what the patient's experience is. We also have patients write back in and saying, actually, my treatment didn't go very well. By the way, they were in 3 years ago. So 3 years have passed and you have a therapist who's over-treating or under-treating and you don't know. And you wonder why your engagement is so problematic. You wonder why you have drop-off in your funnel. So follow-up is not I sent my email, I made my phone call. It is a strategic point of value. It's where you surface feedback. It's where you understand what's happening in your patient body. This is an absolute must for practices. It's not an administrative afterthought. If you had £100,000 today, put all of it in follow-up. Turn follow-up into a value driver for the clinic. Stop spending on marketing. You will find incredible growth opportunity in the latent demand that exists in your patient population. That is where you can create new value, both for your practice and also for your patients.
And then what happens with the follow-up fallacy is that people come in and they're faced with the empty desk syndrome in the front house. So it's a cycle.
100%.
The 48-hour drift. So this is when no one calls a canceled patient back within 2 days and then they're gone. Same thing can apply to leads. So can you talk about the very strict window of engagement with either leads or cancellations?
There's this catchphrase in healthcare, in many businesses, speed to lead. How quickly do you get to your leads? How quickly do you follow up? Now, lead management is a slightly different animal because speed to lead matters. How quickly can you engage with that patient? Because if it's not really fast, they're going elsewhere. So speed to lead matters a lot in lead management. It doesn't matter as much in retention and recall and follow-up, because these are patients who have already been inside your program. But what absolutely does matter in retention and recall and follow-up is the quality of that interaction, the extent to which it is personalized, the extent to which it feels human. We have people often write back into us saying, this is a human, this is such a surprise. So speed to lead matters, but more important than speed to lead, where you capture your top 1% of high intent leads, is everyone else. Because if you have 100 new inquiries a month, getting to all of them within 5 minutes will increase conversion, but it will not convert everyone, and you'll still have massive drop-off. And so you have a 48-hour waterfall when a patient engages with you, either as a lead, as a recall, as a follow-up, as a retention patient. You've got 48 hours to make that magical. You have to deliver patient relationship magic in a 48-hour window or they're gone. It takes an incredible amount of effort to reactivate a patient who has gone cold at any point in time. It starts to decay at 48 hours. We know this, we see it all the time. We have practices that say, oh, they walked out, they told me they would check their calendar and get back in touch, which of course they're never going to do because who in their right mind would do that when life is so busy? But at 48 hours, things get bad. So going back, who is the revenue manager? No one, so you have a revenue orphan. There is no one to own that problem. And now at every 48-hour interval, you have another problem, which is that your patient is decaying. As soon as they walk out the door, they are decaying. And if you put this in a clinical context, if you think about something like oncology or acute care, acute intervention, there are operating procedures, standard operating procedures in place to ensure, to the best of the practice's ability, that patient has the appropriate follow-up from a clinical perspective, because if you don't follow up, it gets bad. And it is problematic for the patient. And so you have this really high intent follow-up when you are pursuing a clinical pathway that requires that. But a lot of clinical pathways don't require the same kind of clinical precision. Doesn't mean they don't require the same kind of revenue or commercial precision because you are running a business. And by the way, taking someone through a care pathway and ensuring completion is not just good for business. It is also good for them. They came in for a problem, help them solve that problem fully. Don't put a Band-Aid solution around it. Take them all the way through the journey. But in order to do that, you have to have someone who owns that problem, or you end up with holes all over the calendar and patients who have absolutely no idea what's going on in the practice.
Why does it get bad after 48 hours? What's the risk that clinics are taking by not responding to patients and cancellations within that 48-hour period?
So I think you have to imagine for a minute, you're a customer. Be a customer or a patient instead of being a provider for a moment. If you've come into a practice and you've had a clinical experience, that experience was, if it's a good practice, very positive. And it is around that positive affect that you are most likely to be able to continue that program of care. Dental is a great example. So in dentistry, it's good for your teeth and it's good for the business. When you go in for a visit, you almost always walk out with a recommendation for hygiene. Yes, it is good for business. Yes, it's also just good for your teeth. But the likelihood of converting on hygiene is dramatically higher if you've just had a very palatable experience at the dentist, as opposed to you're on holiday, you are managing your school calendar, you're managing your work calendar, you're managing your dog sitting, you're managing life. And now someone is trying to sneak into your calendar and insert themselves into an unnatural process. When you are not in the course of care, it's unnatural for you to make a decision to go back and do that. And that's why that 48-hour period is so important, because you've just had a clinical experience. You are cognitively and subconsciously understanding the benefit to your health of that experience, and you can continue on that basis, both to your benefit and also to the benefit of the practice, to the benefit of the business. And so you have this 48-hour window. In some cases, it's 72 hours, of course. In some cases, it's 24 hours, of course. But that recency around the visit is absolutely critical. And I had this experience recently where I went to the dentist, my poor dentist, they're getting absolutely hammered right now because I just changed dental practices. I went to the dentist, I asked the front desk about one of their plans. It took them 4 days to send me an email with a PDF attachment about the plan. Nothing afterwards, zero, no follow-up. And I'm absolutely positive that's not because they don't care. It's because they didn't document it anywhere. There's no system of documentation. So that PDF email is just sitting in someone's inbox. It's not in a CRM, which you think is your practice management software. It's probably not, but that is a fundamental problem in the practice because you are failing to serve patients.
Next, we're going to go into the hero receptionist trap. And I feel like this has come up with every single clinic that we've spoken to. This is expecting the receptionist to be a clinician, the admin, and the salesperson all at once, along with being their PA to pick up their coffee. The receptionist role is extensive in the clinician's eyes, and that can be a trap. Can you explain why?
Yeah, the hero or the heroine receptionist is probably the most dangerous thing in the clinic. It is the single biggest threat to revenue, to growth, is put it in the reception desk. This happens with everything. It happens with procurement. It happens with social media managing. It happens with client reception. It happens with sales and lead conversion. It happens with branding. It happens with website management. It happens with recall and follow-up. It happens with coffees and personal administrative issues for the practitioners. My receptionist will do it. My medical secretary will do it. There are only so many things that one person can do, and even fewer things that any one person can do well. And so you have a reception desk which has become traffic control on the highway to move things from A to B. And the expectation, that part of the clinic, which by the way is always overstretched, you will never ever hear a front office team say, it's easy, I'm on top of things. There is always more to do because it is a fire hose of a department. The water just keeps coming. It just keeps hitting that desk. And so the idea that I'll just put it in the reception desk because I've got a great reception team is actually code for intellectual laziness or an assumption that team is equipped either in the talent, with the tech and the tools, or with the techniques in order to actually deliver the outcome for the business. And they cannot, which is why you hiring a booking coordinator who will work for 35 hours a week, meanwhile your patients are working 120 hours a week to get in touch with you, 35 hours a week, with the wrong technology, with no background or experience in pipeline management, but they sound good on the phone, is not the solution to why you are leaking revenue all over the place.
I have a question. Why are receptionists not equipped to be the hero and cover everything from front of house to revenue to PA work?
I used to work in reception at a healthcare practice, and very early on in the journey for Coherent, I was also in the reception desk at many of our clients, trying to understand what's exactly going on there. In uniform, the whole deal. And what you very quickly realize is that a certain kind of person is exceptionally good at a reception job. Exceptionally good, far better than most. That person is extraordinarily attentive to detail. They're very service-minded. They're very procedural. Plus, they are not commercial. They are not commercial. Commercial doesn't mean salesy. Commercial means tracking revenue. Commercial means thinking about growth for the business. And so the assumption that my medical secretary or my reception team is also someone who owns revenue for me is fundamentally wrong. It is no different than saying my finance manager is also my sales manager. Of course they're not. It's a talent gap, it's a technique and training gap, and it's a tools and technology gap. So you've got 3 breaking points for that front office team. And a lot of clinic owners will try and address this by saying, I'm going to bring in a sales coach for my front office team. Let me do some professional development with a salesperson. They'll come in and they'll give my team the what to do and how to do it and make it magical. And that will fail because 2 hours of professional development once a quarter, if you're lucky, does not suddenly equip people with what takes oftentimes years to develop. In terms of know-how, in terms of focus, in terms of commerciality, in terms of thinking about how to qualify and disqualify and feed that back to a marketing function. This is a totally different person, which isn't to say one is better or worse than the other. They're just different people. And there's this tendency in healthcare to hire a medical secretary or receptionist and treat them like someone who's responsible for revenue. And it's unfair. And so you end up with a team that is overworked, in your view, might be underperforming and are failing to move the business forward. But that is not a failure on the front desk. It's a failure of the clinic leadership or of the provider leadership to assume that these are the same categories of talent. And we collaborate closely with a private hospital. They have an enormous sales team, enormous 20 people dedicated to purely focusing on sales lead conversion. Forget recall and retention, just focusing on lead conversion. 20 people. Those 20 people are tucked away in an office. They don't sit at the front desk. Now, it's a large private hospital, so they have the luxury of doing that. They have the resources to hire that team and to staff them elsewhere and to give them more focus and presence. I'm not sure if they're doing a good job, but at least they're separating those two functions. But most smaller clinics, you're doing 1 million in turnover, 2 million in turnover, 5 million in turnover. You cannot afford to resource a team and a technology program that can deliver the kinds of repeatable outcomes that you want. And you have a gap for that reason.
And that's the talent hole.
That is a talent hole.
So
that's exactly what that is.
It's the clinic's lack of commercial COO, and no one actually builds or runs the engine, the business engine.
100%. You have a talent hole. We have a clinic that we just started working with. Wonderful practice, 5-star, incredible patient reviews, a practitioner who obviously cares more about his patients than most. And there's a growth problem and there's a revenue problem. And so we're trying to be supportive, and there's a decision to hire someone full-time in addition to working with us. And that full-time person does not have on paper objectively the skills to do what this clinic needs them to do objectively. But hey, they can talk marketing and they can talk design and they can make it sound good and they can point to many years in the industry. None of those things are positive. The practitioner will assume, wow, this person has done it there and they've done it there and they've done it there. What they've actually done is the same thing in each of those environments. And that thing is not to fix revenue. That thing is to tweak the website, improve load speed, take some nicer imagery, make sure there's stronger customer service at the front office. They are not building a technology program and a talent program that does revenue for you. You need to hire people who DFY, they do it for you. They don't do it themselves. You don't want someone who's trying to figure this out for the first time. You want someone who has a playbook, a repeatability. Cool, first we do this, then we do this, and then we do this. And this is why we approach it in that manner. You cannot take risk around revenue, just like you can't take risk around clinical care. This is your business. Business will close. That is a real problem for you and for your patients.
Okay, we're going to change topics, go into payments. Can you explain what payment pinball is? How money bounces between systems like cards, backs, go cardless, and insurers with no single source of truth?
So payments pinball, back actually when I was running a practice, payments pinball is the experience of having payments in 5 or 6 different systems. And oftentimes practices will do that because they're trying to optimize for cost. And they're saying, these folks charge me 0.6% and these charge me 1.5%. So let's move this volume over here and do that volume over there. Great, I've saved money. And it's a false promise. Because what you've actually done is you've created stress in your front office. And so now payments is becoming a detractor. It's becoming a distracting experience for your front office team. Because in order for them to check when someone has paid and what they've paid, they have to go to 3 places. Now, a lot of practices will say, I must have integration with my practice management software. Integration tells me when someone has paid and when someone has not paid. And there is some truth in that. Having reconciliation between the appointment book and the payment helps. And you have incredible rigidity in that system. So as a very simple example, you might use an integrated payment system with your practice management software, but you might have a patient that wants to self-finance part of the treatment and treatment finance or take out some kind of provision for the second half of the payment. Does the practice management software allow for that flexibility? More often than not, the answer is no. Another great example, I've got someone on a membership program, and now I want to discount a one-off payment, but hold on, my practice management software has a fixed line item for a certain treatment, so I have to take the payment of that amount and then put some notes in to get it right. What you actually want is one system that gives you supreme flexibility to capture all kinds of payments in one place, so that when you go in and you type in Joe, you can see all of the different things that Joe has paid you for and when they have paid you. And you can manage that in a single environment rather than moving between systems. And that's a bit of a mindset shift because a lot of practices will say, I want to value optimize for basis points, percentages points on the transaction value. But actually what you should be optimizing for is time. How much time is this decision going to burden my front office with? How much time does it take my front office team to manage the additional payment gateway, the insured billing, the treatment finance, the direct debit provision for a recurring subscription or membership program? How much time does it take me to check a bank statement to know if a patient has actually paid me? How much time does it take me to go out and ask the patient for their bank details in order to issue a refund to them? Time matters more than 0.3%, than 0.4%. 5 minutes per transaction is a problem for your business. 0.2% or 0.3% is not in the same way. And so payments pinball is, let's just hope that things shake out in a way that makes sense. when in reality, what you want is a system for managing your cash inflows that gives you a single source of truth.
That branches into the next term related in terms of the manual work as well. The dinner time reconciliation, when clinic owners will manually check, stripe, or go cardless at 9 p.m. because staff can't access accounts, and that's their dedicated time to check.
We work with a dental practice, and they use a collection. They used a collection of payment methods. One of those methods was Stripe. Stripe sent payment links, which many providers will offer payment links. The practitioner hadn't figured out, or maybe there isn't a way, to create tiered access for his front office team to be able to request and confirm payment, but not necessarily get into the administrator settings. And so he was so terrified of his account details being available or visible to the front office team that he was the only one in the clinic. This is a £2 million dental practice turnover, 2 million turnover dental practice. He's the principal practitioner, principal dentist. He's in treatment room all day. He was the only one who was sending out payment links. The only one in the clinic sending out payment links. When was he doing that? Around dinner time. And so you take a step back from that. You talk about the fact that running a private practice is incredible and relentless. And the reason it's relentless is because you are making these micro adjustments, like sending out payment links around dinner time with your family. And that is where the whole system of work becomes unsustainable, especially for principal practitioners and for clinic leaders who are getting swallowed up in these little points of administration. We had the same thing with a chiropractic clinic that used to use Go Cardless. Again, these are great systems, not knocking the payment system. They used to go cardless. Same issue around administrator access and flexibility. A system that was designed for the practice owner or the business owner or an accounting team, not for a front desk. And so that principle was, again, at night, around dinner time, sending out direct debits, ensuring that direct debits were running properly for his patient body. That is not okay. There's nothing about that makes sense. And that is the reality for many practices. Whether you're using integrated payments or not, you often don't have full flexibility to do it all, and to do it all in a cost-effective way.
Going into being cost effective, the FAC £5 touch, so this is every single time admin touches a payment, it costs around £5 in wasted time. That's huge. Can you explain what that means?
So I think to imagine being a medical secretary or receptionist, and your time is your value. How much patient follow-up can you do? How much firefighting can you do? How much work can you offload from other parts of the clinic to create capacity? Time is your unit of measure. It's really interesting. If you look at the landscape as a whole right now, a huge amount of the innovation is around clinical time. How do I create more time for my practitioners, medical scribes, AI scribes, note-taking scribes? All of that is around time creation, capacity creation for the practitioners. But your bottleneck is still in the front of house. So now you have the other side of it, which is AI receptionists or AI message senders and all the rest of it trying to create capacity. But payments is an enormous point of friction in constraining time, hugely so. And unless you are able to remove that administration, you are paying in time and money. And what we usually think, and what we usually say to practices, is that every time someone in your team has to think about, ask about, look for, check, or communicate with a patient about a payment, you are probably spending about £5. So again, it's great. You can value optimize 0.4% to 0.3%, but you know what? You're paying £5 because you have to go ask that patient for their bank details. You're spending £5 because in order for your reception team to send out a treatment finance link to the patient, they have to sign into a different system. But hey, they don't have the login for that system. So they have to go and reach out to the business owner, who, by the way, is in surgery. And so now the patient is waiting, possibly looking elsewhere. The medical secretary receptionist has another thing on their to-do list that they have to work through. And the principal is now spending some of their time looking up their credentials, resetting a password, and sending it to the front of house. So every time someone needs to do something that is not cool, you can pay me this way. Payment complete, no problem. Every time that happens, you have waste. And it's not in basis points. It's not in 0.1%. It's not in 0.2%. It's in pounds. It is in 1%, 2%, 3% of that person's time accumulating over the course of weeks, months, years.
Can you go into the invoice black hole? This is when invoices sent out by email are unpaid for weeks and are untracked in PMSs.
We have a private pediatrician that we work with who has £60,000 and growing of unpaid invoices. £60,000, £70,000 of unpaid invoices, £70,000 of unpaid invoices. It is an unfathomable amount of bad debt. And it's not bad debt because the patients are bad. And you often have this narrative in healthcare, which is the patients are trying to avoid paying me. Rarely is that the case. It's often the case that the reason that people aren't paying you is because your system for enabling payment is so high friction. Let me send you an email with my bank details is not good enough in a world where you can click one button and buy an entire basket of groceries, your child's bike, a flat screen TV, and sun lotion from Amazon. It's not okay that you need to go and manually enter bank details from a medical invoice 3 or 4 weeks after you've had a consultation, when you can do one-click checkout and have exotic fruits delivered to your door in 72 hours. It's just not okay. That friction makes it very hard for patients to do the right thing. The way you make it easy for them to do the right thing is thinking about when you communicate with them, how you communicate with them, and how many buttons they need to press in order to initiate a payment. When you ask someone to pay you by bank transfer, you are asking them to press a lot of buttons. Account numbers, account names, sort codes, reference IDs, transaction values. And hey, by the way, they enter one thing wrong, your entire reconciliation process goes out the door. Because now in your wonderful Excel that your finance team is looking at when they export from 3 different systems, they are control Fing a reference number that has been entered incorrectly. Or they're control Fing a 75.06 pound transaction when actually the patient has paid 75.60. Can't find it. That is time lost, that is money lost, and then you're going back to the patient to clarify, degrading trust, degrading the experience, and increasing friction in providing high-quality care. So you need to abstract away that problem from the front office and from the patient body.
Let's go into the kitchen-only mindset where clinics obsess over treatment room quality but neglect the business restaurant service.
We love to use the metaphor of a restaurant when we think about healthcare because much like a restaurant, you have 2 very distinct parts of service delivery, and healthcare is ultimately service delivery. One part is the food coming out of the kitchen, and one part is the service and the experience of eating in the restaurant. Healthcare has an obsession with the kitchen. The kitchen is the clinical care, the point of provision, and for all the right reasons, by the way. Clinical care is where the magic happens. It is absolutely non-negotiable. The clinical care needs to be great, it needs to be off the chart. You need to have all of the wonderful things that you would expect of a Michelin star restaurant need to be true inside of the clinic room. And when you walk out to front office, it should feel as good and in some cases better. And it almost never does. And the NHS is perhaps an incredible example of this. If you have an urgent problem and you are under clinical care and supervision, it is extraordinary. The quality of care is off the chart, probably best in world. The front office experience is waiting rooms, long lines, inefficient processes, bad intake forms, and confusion. So the experience as a result is broken. The experience is bad. The overinvestment in kitchen, the underinvestment in service, the underinvestment in the interaction layer between patient and provider is a huge problem. And you see this all over the place. You see this when a patient calls the practice and the first thing that they hear after being a patient of yours for 10 years and spending £100,000 with you is, please press 1. Please press 2. Please hold. I'm sorry, no one is available to answer your call right now. If you pay someone £100,000, they better answer your call every single time that you call without fail within 3 seconds. That should be the standard. And that is a problem. And that quality of provision, that quality of service does not exist. And so this is why when we think about healthcare transformation, there's a lot of focus rightly in clinical transformation in the kitchen. And we're trying to achieve the same kind of transformation on the service and operational side of healthcare provision.
That goes into the care-only fallacy where clinics say, oh, we're not salespeople, forgetting that private practice is actually a business.
The idea that you run a clinic and you're not in sales is horrifically wrong. There's no other way to say it. There may be a cultural barrier. There may be a disconnect between how people think of themselves. There may be a difference about what you say in open doors and closed doors. But as a healthcare provider, you are in the business of service. And you know that healthcare providers recognize this because they ask for Google reviews. Google reviews is what for a hotel. And now it's also what for a pediatrician. And now it's also what for a dentist, because it is a signal of care and attention to detail and customer outcomes. Very rarely when you look at a Google review for a practice, do you get a detailed recount of the clinical outcome. What you will more often than not see is, the team are wonderful. I love visiting the clinic. They're really responsive. Not, I had a root canal and they replaced this molar with that tooth and I was in and out in 14 points. They are focused on the customer experience of being in your clinic. And if that experience is bad, you have a problem. And for the same reason, if you are thinking about Google reviews, if you are investing in a website, you are in the business of sales. A website is an extension of yourself and is an extension of your practice. It's a shiny, nice, modern extension of the care you provide. So you are absolutely in the business of sales. Whether you call it sales, whether you want to dress it up as something else, sales doesn't have to mean pushy. Many things in life are sales without the push. Healthcare is one of them. It's consultative, it's discovery-led, it's about understanding the patient's desires and needs and seeing if you have the solution to those problems. In some cases you do, in some cases you don't, that's fine. But you are absolutely in the business of delivering a high-quality service and something that ultimately incentivizes compliance to the clinical pathway and, as a result, revenue uplift for your practice. There is no way around that.
This is slightly different, but the CRM mirage, I think, is very important to talk about. Believing that a PMS is the equivalent of a CRM because it's built for admin and it's not patient relationship management. So, yeah.
This is a bit of an overstatement, but I think the single thing killing healthcare right now, more than anything else from a customer experience perspective, is that everybody assumes that an EMR, EHR practice management software is your CRM. That is one problem to attack. It is the absence of a fit-for-purpose tooling stack in CRM for healthcare. That is the fundamental issue in patient engagement, is that you do not have a system of record for the customer. You have a system of record for the patient. And you know this by the key features and capabilities of the practice management software or the EMR, EHR. You log in, you see a calendar. If you're thinking about customer first, you log in and you see your customer. You don't see your diary. When you click into a patient, you don't see their medical notes. You see their communication preferences, their dialogue, a native summary about all of the interaction and about the customer profile, not about the medical notes. So assuming that your PMS or your EMR EHR is a customer relationship management tool is wrong. And one of the problems in healthcare is not just that you don't have the technology layer, but you don't have the user. You think about a business like HubSpot. HubSpot has a range of power users inside of their businesses, the customers that they serve, who are specialized in using that tool, whose job function relies on the correct use of that tool. And so they have mastery of that tool and they can use it to a high standard. When I was running Clinic, we tried every imaginable combination of tools. And we still had the problem of no one in the clinic being able to use it properly because you have a front office that are secretarial, medical, procedural, service-driven, not thinking about customer optimization. And there is a talent gap. It's not just about tech gap. It's a team and a tech problem. And so when you look at your PMS, EMR, EHR, you have a fundamental problem. You've got the wrong tools. You've got a bicycle and you're trying to drive it like a quad bike. It just doesn't work that way. No matter how many bells and whistles you stick into that thing, no matter how many automated follow-ups you put into that thing, no matter how many communication channels you stick into that thing, the tool is not fit for purpose. You have a problem at a tooling level, which as a result makes it very hard for the clinic to deliver on the promise of patient relationship magic. Please show me where patient relationship magic happens. And oftentimes it's non-existent.
So then there's acquisition addiction. This is when clinics overspend on marketing while leaking value from existing patients. They try to fill the leaky bucket with another role, like marketing.
Yeah,
And
we love using healthcare words to describe business problems because it's very relatable, obviously. So here you've got acquisition addiction, obviously being a very recognizable word in healthcare. So what are we addicted to? We're addicted to more leads, more inquiries, more at the top of the funnel. Meanwhile, there's no bottom of the bucket, so everything's just dropping out. But the way that practices are programmed and trained to think about their growth problem is turn on the tap, increase the flow. That will solve the problem. That's not root cause. That's not root cause. Root cause is you have a problem at the bottom and the middle of the funnel. Once patients start engaging with you, they fall away. You're spending all this money and time on new patient acquisition. You're addicted to this drip feed of new leads, but half of them don't make it to the end of the journey. If you put that in the context of an e-commerce business, imagine an e-commerce business that is addicted to getting people to add stuff to their shopping cart, but never pay. More people add more stuff to your shopping cart, but then abandon the cart. Your business will fail. It is a cart problem. You're not getting people all the way through the checkout moment. If you're an e-commerce business, you're dead. That's the end of your business. If people don't go all the way through, you have a problem. The challenge in healthcare is that going all the way through is very complicated. It's not just about a button. It's not about an impulse purchase. Going all the way through in healthcare is really hard. It's multi-stakeholder. It's tools, tech, team, technique, talent. It's all of these things working together to bring someone through from A to Z. And that is a really, really hard thing to do in healthcare, but it is as fundamental as an empty cart in an e-commerce business.
what is the legacy list graveyard? So this is when thousands of patients, ex-patients, are sitting idle in PMSs with no re-engagement system.
We've got practices that we work with that have, I'm not exaggerating, tens of thousands of patients, tens of thousands, who saw them at some point in the past and who have not heard from the practice in years. Now, within those tens of thousands, some will have moved away, no problem. Some will have been successfully served, no problem. Some may have disqualified themselves on the basis of price or ability to pay, no problem. Let's take half of them out. So you got 10,000 patients in your graveyard. It's a bit of a strong word in healthcare. Obviously, they're not dead, but you've got 10,000 patients sitting back there. Let's take half of them away. They're no longer relevant. They're not qualified. Whatever the reason might be, they had a bad experience. So now you've got 5,000 people who at one point in time or another had a clinical issue. Don't you think they should hear from you? Especially if you're managing a chronic condition. You're in chiropractic, you're in physiotherapy, you're in dentistry, you're in dermatology, medical aesthetics, whatever it might be. These are patients who came to you with a problem. Oftentimes those problems come back. By the way, you do a knee replacement, a hip replacement, that problem also might come back. I've got a very good friend who did a hip replacement and then dislocated her hip. She went back to the orthopedic surgeon 3 times. Healthcare is a forever thing. You want to provide service to a patient, it's a forever thing. You're a respiratory physician, somebody comes in and sees you because they have long COVID. Guess what? They've got long COVID for a very long time. They don't just have long COVID for the 5 minutes that they're in front of you and the 2 weeks after they leave. They've got long COVID forever. And my goodness, they would probably love to hear from you 2 years after the fact. Hey, I was just thinking about you. How are you? Turns out I'm not so good. I think I should come back in and see you. Okay, no problem. You've got a graveyard of customers, patients who are not served, just sitting back there. No one's doing anything about it.
And what's our experience with engaging this graveyard?
Turns out they come back to life. This graveyard of patients, turns out they come back to life. Oh, so good to hear from you. I was actually just thinking I should book back in. Oh, I was just on holiday and I tweaked my ankle again. I think I need to come back and see. Oh, I was wondering actually, I have this friend and they told me about this thing. Is that something that you do? Doesn't take much. Takes 8 touch points over several months, managed by someone who understands engagement. Sure, that's a lot. But it does not take marketing spam. Does not take promotional mailers. Does not take seasonal discounts. It takes human touch at the right time, in the right way, on the right channel to connect and to reconnect with that patient body. It is about communication optimization. That is very hard to do when you are focused on a very small sample of patients. And we have the luxury of seeing tens of thousands of patients, in some cases hundreds of thousands of engagements. And we, as a result, have the benefit of looking at exactly when, not maybe when, exactly when a patient is most likely to re-engage and why they're likely to re-engage.
And what happens, what are their responses when we engage them at the right time and the right
Lovely to
day?
hear from you. Lovely to hear from you. Oh, so nice to hear from you. Thank you so much for reaching out. It couldn't come at a better time. Not, please go away. Not, please don't reach out to me anymore. Maybe you hear, hey, I've moved away. Could you remove me from your system? Okay, that's fine. But more often than not, what we hear from patients that have not heard from you, the practice, in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years is, thanks so much. Wow, nice to hear from you.
Revenue that would have just been
It would have been gone, not realized.